Hi everyone, and a massive welcome to AXA Arctic Live. We are broadcasting from the UK Arctic Research Station in Ny-Ålesund on the island of Svalbard, and we'll come to all that in just a bit. But we have a wonderful Meet an Arctic Scientist live lesson for you now, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Steve to Arctic Live. Welcome, Steve. We're going to be hearing about your amazing career and your amazing research in just a bit. But before we get to that, we have a little bit of housekeeping to do. We have the ability to post questions, and thank you very much for all of you who have submitted questions in advance already. But please do ask more questions live. That is in the chat box to the side of the video player. Now, if you are looking to watch the video full screen at the front of a classroom or on your laptop at home, you can always get the Q&A on a secondary device by going to the same lesson page or to the live lesson homepage on Encounter EDU. If there is a question that has already been asked, please don't submit the same one again. Please consider upvoting that question, and that can be done by clicking on the thumbs up icon, and that is beside each of the questions in the interaction app in the chat box. Now, if you do have any technical issues during the live stream, you can use the support, and that is accessed by clicking on the green chat circle, and that is at the bottom right hand corner on each page of the Encounter EDU website. So that should give you an idea about how to interact, how to get in touch with us, and so keep those comments and questions coming through the chat box, and any support issues through the chat button at the bottom. Now, this is a Meet an Arctic Scientist live lesson. There is a student sheet available to make notes, so you can get a feel by the end of the lesson what makes up a career as an Arctic scientist, the different tools that you might use, the different ways you get around. It's a bit different up here to doing science potentially in a lab in the UK, US, or elsewhere. Some of the things that Steve has studied, some of the hobbies he may have, what the things that he does are, what are the verbs that we can see, we might talk about some of those, verbs in a little bit later. What are the doing words? So without further ado, we're going to get an insight, Steve, into your work, what it is you study, and then where you've been studying it. And then we'll get a chance to come to your questions towards the end of this live lesson. But Steve, thank you so much again for being on Arctic Live. You're a microbiologist. You study microbiology.
Yes.
And because it's science, we seem to have all these Greek words chucked at us the whole time. But we've got three sort of Greek words that sort of make up microbiology. We have the micro bit. What's that getting at?
That's getting at that they're really small. They're things you cannot see with your naked eye. You need a microscope.
So we've got the really small, the bio bit.
Bio is just life. Biology, life. Yes.
Okay, so we've got tiny life, and then the logy bit.
Logy is study of those things. So
okay.
Study of tiny life. That's what I do.
Study tiny life, and some examples of the tiny life that you study. We've talked about. We met last night. You arrived on station yesterday. We're talking about cyanobacteria. What's going on? What's going on there? I mean, we think about bacteria as things that maybe live in our gut. Maybe the wrong bacteria can make us sick. But we've got these cyanobacteria, a funny color on
Yeah, so cyanobacteria are just like the plants of the micro world. They're green, they photosynthesize, and they do everything a plant does, but they're microscopic, and they're bringing in carbon from the atmosphere. They're building their bodies with using light as their energy source.
Amazing. And then from there, what else might we see? I mean, I think are there any sort of single cell sort of animal type or organisms like
Yeah,
that?
so in the microbiological world, there's everything you would have in the macro world, this big world. There's predators, things that eat the cyanobacteria. They also have viruses that attack them. It's just like a ecosystem or a food web that is completely microscopic,
Completely
basically.
microscopic. And I've got to say, one of my favorite ones of these microscopic animals is the water bear
Oh
or
yeah, yeah.
tardigrade. I mean, they look pretty cute. I mean, is that I mean, you can't see them with your naked eye. I mean, they're tiny, 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 tiny.
Yeah, well, water bears are getting at the edge of almost being able to see them with your naked eye, but not quite. And they're like they look like bears. They look like microscopic polar bears, basically, but they have a weird snout that they use to feed on bacteria and other microbes, and they actually walk around kind of clumsily under the microscope. They're really cute. Yeah.
And you were saying earlier, I think that they can survive over winter by basically losing all the liquid and sort of like freeze drying.
Yeah, they can be freeze dried and survive being frozen for most of the year. And then when it thaws and there's water, they come back to life and can go back to moving around. And they're pretty amazing.
I mean, all this microscopic life. I mean, it started. This was the first life on Earth, wasn't it? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of sort of how old this life is?
Yeah, so microscopic life we know probably goes back billions of years. Some people think 3.5 billion years ago there were bacteria and archaea and other very primitive forms of life. Tiny, tiny.
Tiny, tiny life. Because if I mean, I don't know for those classes watching, but certainly for me, if I think about old life on Earth, I'm full dinosaur on this one.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
But
that's what people normally think. Yeah.
but dinosaurs are pretty new on this planet. I mean, you're talking about 3.5 billion years ago for the sort of first life we're seeing, maybe 4 billion years ago. Dinosaurs coming in maybe sort of 400, 300 million years ago.
Yeah, quite recent compared to bacteria. Yeah.
Wow, and then humans. I mean, we just don't really
Yeah,
figure at all in the sort of
we've
scope
barely
of
been
life.
on the Earth at all in geological time. Yeah, just very, very recent.
So if I'm thinking, if you're looking, if you even if you stand up in the classroom or at home, if your whole body length was the whole of geological time, the whole of time on Earth, the things that you're studying first came around your knees,
Yeah, probably in the
about
history of the Earth.
the
Yeah,
history of the Earth,
pretty far down there,
pretty
definitely.
far down there, maybe
Yeah,
your shins,
yeah, that sounds about right.
down,
Yeah,
down, down in that part, and that's then coming up to you're sort of getting up towards your mouth nose for dinosaurs
right. Yeah,
in terms of time. You're getting birds and mammals are coming around here,
yep.
and
Real
then
recent. Yeah,
we're sort of like maybe a hair,
yeah. Tiny bit of hair on
a,
top of your head.
a
Yeah,
tiny bit of
way up
hair
there.
on top of your head.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, it's absolutely amazing to think about that. And I mean, I mean, if I think about sort of where one could go on this planet to study all of the life, where there's so much diversity of life, and some classes may have studied this place uh, in a different topic. But I think rainforest. I think rainforest as a sort of where a biologist would go to study lots of life.
Yeah.
That's not you.
No, no, I don't like rainforests. I like cold, dry places, and we study life that lives in cold, basically, and very dry areas, high elevation, high latitude. Um, yeah,
But if I think about, we've both been to the Himalayas, we've both been to the Arctic. We've, I mean, certainly when I sort of am in these environments, whether it's the sort of polar regions or these very high mountain regions, I don't see much going on. I mean, it's not a wildlife
yeah,
spotters,
yeah.
place to go. But how come you're looking at life in these places rather than the easier places? Even my back garden, probably.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've just always been interested in mountains and extreme places ever since I was a child, and I love mountains. I love snow. I like everything about beautiful, stark environments like this one. And I got really curious about what can live in those sorts of environments and what they're doing there, because we've known a long time that there's a lot of life in these systems. And I'm also interested in it from a perspective of global change and global warming, and that these areas are endangered by global warming, especially, and some of this life is disappearing, and we need to study it before it's all gone. Um,
So what you're telling me is, I mean, there's the occasional polar bear that comes past, especially in the summer. There's a couple of Arctic foxes who live under the building
yeah,
next door. A few reindeer, some bird life, ptarmigans, snow buntings. What you're telling me is that all of this amazing whiteness, this is full of life.
it's full of life. Yeah, some of it's not always active, but it's at certain times of year. There's a lot of life on a glacier. There's a lot of life in a glacier. There's around a glacier, and that's what we're interested in. And how they do it, what sort of adaptations do they have to be able to do that, and how they work together to live in such a harsh environment.
Because you're working up near the front of a glacier, just up here, the Mitra Löwenbreen.
Yeah,
Bream being the Norwegian for
yeah,
glacier. Uh, and I think we're talking about that there's lots of places you find life, but there's also places that are potentially new to life or that don't have life.
right, right. Because as the glaciers are melting due to global warming, they're leaving behind new ground that was under the glacier before. And I think you're showing a picture of a site in that's in the Andes where just in 5 years those glaciers had receded about 200 meters in distance. And so you have this new ground that's basically rock and sand and whatever was under the glacier, but there wasn't much going on there life wise. But now it's opened up to the atmosphere. Microbes start colonizing those areas, and we're interested in how that process takes place, how long it takes, what kind of organisms are colonizing, and how long it will take them to form a community of organisms.
And you can probably track that because as a glacier recedes, more rapidly now through global warming, what you sort of maybe something that was uncovered 90 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago, you can actually sort of almost like nature's laboratory showing you how life begins in the dirt, in the rock.
Yeah, yeah, because it's at glaciers, especially at a place like this, they've followed where the glacier was over the last 100 years, and so you can go look at what's on the soil that's 90 years old and compare it to something that's just been uncovered, and so it's a space for time chronosequence we call it, and that's what we're
And
studying.
and do you see life after a year, after 10 years, 20 years? What kind of things might you be able to see with the naked eye to recognize that though?
Well, with the naked eye, it just will look like dirt for the first 10 years probably. But immediately, immediately in the first year, you have new microbes already colonizing. So under the microscope, you would see new cyanobacteria growing there that weren't there the year before. So it's a fairly immediate process because things are deposited out of the atmosphere, spores of different microbes, and even the cells themselves are so small they're floating in the atmosphere. So there's life coming in very quickly.
And so, I mean, we've got this idea of, and at some point the planet was almost like a sort of
Yeah, big
ground
rock.
uncovered by glaciers, that new life, and yet now we have so many different habitats and environments around the planet. Is that just a process of time that goes on, or is there still an impact on where we're finding those different habitats on the planet?
Yeah, I mean, still, it depends on where you are on the planet. You'll never have a rainforest here unless the continents shift and
Yeah,
it goes.
there have been forests and rain dinosaurs and everything up here a
At
long
one
time.
point,
At
yeah,
one point,
when the continents were down further
yeah.
south before they moved. Yeah, so but as long as it's this far north and as long as the Earth hasn't heated up that much, this will always be tundra at the best.
Okay.
It will never get beyond tundra. Um, yeah, so it depends on where you are on the planet.
And do I mean probably way outside of this, but for my own personal interest, do we know how long it took something like the Amazon or sort of Southeast Asian rainforests to go from rock to the amazing diverse communities they are now?
It it probably didn't take that long once. I mean, that was more of an evolutionary question of life had to evolve to fill those spaces in the most in the efficient way they do now. That wasn't always the case, but even by the time of the dinosaurs, the plant life was very very diverse and could colonize
I
quite
know when
quickly.
I'm speaking to a scientist who considers like a scope of a few billion years as a valid topic of study relatively fast. What are we talking here? We're not talking sort of like a couple of weeks.
No, no, it fought fast in terms of thousands to millions of years to
Okay,
colonize. Yeah.
thousands to millions of years. I love that. That thousands to millions of years is fast. Yeah, when you're looking at
Geologically, yeah.
geologically,
Yeah.
when we're looking at the history of the planet, uh, and not only do you know that you, as a scientist, a big part of your work is field work.
Yeah.
You get to go and visit all these places. It isn't just that you're up here with us in the Arctic. What when you get to these sites, what kind of things do you do?
Well, first of all, you just settle in and try to live. And it's nice to have this research station here, which is close to the glaciers. So it takes that part of worrying about survival out of it. But some of the sites we go to, there isn't this nice infrastructure. And then you're camping and cooking your own food and doing all those things in a tent, which is fun too. I mean, I like that. Um, but yeah, once we're here, we're we're studying with instrumentation what's going on in the soil here. Then we're also taking samples. Like I'm interested in what's in the soil and the sediments on the glacier, so we we sample those and bring them back to the laboratory and extract DNA and RNA from them and look at them under the microscope and try and figure out every life form that's in these samples. And we have that ability now.
You have that amazing and is this sort of like if someone watching were to pursue a science career, is it traveling to these amazing places around the world the whole time, just like finding out what's there, putting some instruments in a glacier, taking samples, or are there some other bits that you have to do as well?
Well, it takes a long time to get all the training you would need to do that. So that's a lot of your life is preparing for this sort of life. And also, no science these days is done on your own, really. I'm working with geophysicists and people in other fields who are studying the same site, and we're trying to work together so we can understand how the biology and the geology and the physics all work together in the system. So yeah, that takes a lot of coordination and time.
And geophysics is that's the sort of the Earth. That's the sort of rocky, earthy,
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
movementy stuff.
Yeah, and also geochemistry. We're studying that too, like what's going on in terms of rocks changing, weathering, and turning into soil, basically.
And I was reading about your work in Antarctica in the dry valleys.
Yeah.
How was being there? What was being in Antarctica like? I mean, it must have just been mind blowing even before you sort of got to the sort of the fascination of the research.
Yeah, yeah. Antarctica is pretty amazing, and especially the dry valleys where we do the work we're doing. It's just beautiful, stark landscape with glaciers and deserts. It's basically a desert with glaciers, and very fascinating things going on there. And yeah, it's just amazing place.
And one of the things I've this word, and I'll try and even though I'm going to get you to spell it to the students
Oh,
watching,
okay.
which is it Cryokinite?
Cryokinite. Yeah.
Cryokinite, and how are we spelling that?
Cry, like CRYO, and then Conite, CONITE. Cryokinite. Yeah.
Cryokinite, and it's an amazing word. It's also an amazing phenomenon. What is Cryokinite, and why does it matter?
Well, cryokinite is when dirt or sediments get on a glacier and they anything dark on a white surface will absorb more light. So the sediments will heat up even though they're on ice, and they'll melt their way into the actual ice, and they will form a pocket of water around them during the summertime, and then life can come to life, and you have these communities of microbes growing down in the glacier in a thawed pocket of sediments. So they're sealed off from the atmosphere, but they're in their own little microcosm. So you have these. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
was just going to think it's almost like a sort of microbial plant pots have been sort of like dropped
Yeah.
on the sort
Yeah.
of glacier.
Right, and they're individual little ecosystems in themselves, and you can have thousands of them on a glacier, and they're each slightly different, but they're surprisingly all quite similar. The kinds of communities that form in them, even if you start in different places, end up being kind of the same things because you have a lot of selection for organisms that can live there.
Which is amazing. So there's you get dirt onto a white icy surface, and then there's all of this life floating around in the atmosphere, and that
Yeah.
kicks things going. I loved also reading about your another method of how life can get to these high cold places, and that was it's not llama, is it
Vicuñas, yeah.
Vicuña poop.
Yeah, so that's our work we've done in the high Andes where the glaciers have retreated a lot and they've left behind vast areas in the Andes, which are dry mostly, but they're also very nutrient limited. There's not, these new soils don't have any nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus.
And when we're talking about nutrients and nitrogen and phosphorus, those are the kinds of things you get in sort of plant food or fertilizer
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
I mean that adds to sort of the bits that helps the plants to grow. So they don't just because we learn in primary science and probably middle school science that you kind of need for a plant, you need carbon dioxide, you need water, and you need light. But they like a few other things as well.
Oh yeah, like all life forms, that you got to have phosphorus to make ATP and nucleic acids. You've got to have
Is
nitrogen.
that proteins?
Well, you need the nitrogen for
Proteins.
proteins.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, so we're all made of the same things, and plants need those things too. So we found in the Andes that it's not really the cold that's keeping the plants from coming in; it's lack of phosphorus and nitrogen. Um, but for some reason, these vicuñas, they're related to llamas. They like to go up at night into the barren areas because they can see predators more easily, or pumas and mountain lions are what we call mountain lions in the States there. So the vicuñas go up at night and they poop, and they poop all in the same place. They like have a latrine. They're and anyway, so you have these places where they've been pooping, and it's like a desert all around, but where they've pooped over the years, you get these islands of vegetation coming up, and that pictures a local dog sitting in one of those islands on the poop. And otherwise, there's no plants within a mile of that spot. But yeah.
And then you found that the vicuñas then come and eat the gardens growing on their own poop.
Yeah, yeah. So they're actually gardening. It seems that way anyway. It's you can't really assign that motive, but they and other animals then come to that same area, and other animals will do stuff around there. So it becomes a little oasis. And we actually, yeah, documented that they come back up and eat some of the vegetation. So it's a way that the land is they're reclaiming this land themselves by their actions.
Amazing, but we're here in the Arctic now.
Yeah,
no
yeah.
vicuña around at the moment.
No, there's reindeer, but no vicuña.
Reindeer, but no vicuña. And 2015, I think I was up. I was up here, and I think it was with a member of your team now, James Bradley. We're out on the same glacier site that you'll be studying, and just sort of remembering some of the sort of logistics of Arctic science.
Yeah.
We've got the skidoos, the snowmobiles. You've had your training, or is your training for that tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah. I haven't been on the skidoo yet.
And that's because we've still got enough snow at the moment. That's what you use to get out towards the glacier site.
Luckily, there's enough snow still here to snowmobile out there. Yeah.
And it's about 5 miles.
I think so. Yeah, it's a good long walk, that's for sure. And last summer we had to walk it every day, back and forth.
That's
a lot of exercise.
An hour and a half walk or so.
Yeah, each way. Yeah,
each way.
And then you work all day up there, so it's the long day. But yeah, I'm relieved we get to use the skidoos.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And other things we have to look out for when doing science up in the Arctic: the world's largest land carnivore.
Yeah, the polar bears, which can be quite dangerous if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah.
And we haven't had really. I don't think we've had any spottings yet this season. They tend to be over the other side of the island. And then come over when the geese come, because that's the sort of summer snacking for them.
They like that. Yeah.
But did you have any last summer?
Yeah, last summer we saw a big mother polar bear out on this island right here with two babies. They were really, really cute. Watched them all day.
Watched them all day.
Yeah.
Amazing. I saw an article about some of your work, or some of your wider team's work, in the New York Times, and the sort of headline sort of intrigued me, and it says, if algae clings to snow on this volcano, can it grow on other desolate worlds?
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah, this is the big question, and you're seeing life in these new places, in places that we assume, for the most part, certainly I assumed, I don't know what, maybe we have some amazingly brilliant, talented scientists watching who probably assumed that there was a bundle of microscopic life here. How does studying this transformation either of ice to these ecosystems or this dirt and rock to sort of plant life inform our understanding of life in the universe?
Yeah, well, so there's this field called astrobiology.
Okay.
Some people call it exobiology, but it's the idea that if we study these extreme environments on Earth, it gives us some insight as to what the limits of life are and where you might be able to find life elsewhere, like on Mars or Jupiter or Pluto or some other planet. And so we're interested in that phenomenon because we study these extreme environments, and the work we've done in Chile and Argentina on these volcanoes. These are the biggest volcanoes in the world. Um, they're very high and they're in the Atacama Desert region, so they're very dry, but they do have snow and it all accumulates in certain places. And then the wind and the light make these ice spires that are called penitentes. And nobody had studied that life on these things. And in 2016, we had an expedition there, and we noticed there were red spots on these ice spires. And so we scraped some of that off, and it turned out to be algae were living on these icicles, basically. And so we've been studying those guys for a few years now. And it's a very weird environment. And there are penitentes on a couple other planets in our solar system. So there is some interest in them from that perspective. Although on one of the, I can't remember, on one of the planets they're actually made out of methane and not water ice, so it's not quite the same. But yeah.
And I mean, does that, do you get to collaborate with NASA and that kind of stuff? I mean, what does that sort of open doors to some interesting sort of relationships and conversations?
Yeah, we've worked with NASA and gotten money from NASA for some of our work. And yeah, people are interested in those kind of environments for astrobiological and reasons.
Brilliant, and great to see that in the chat box we have spelt out Cryokinite as well. So
oh, good.
Yeah, Somebody... so that's been typed in during the live lesson. So do have a look at that later today. We've got a whole bunch of questions, and some of them are about science, some of them are about the sort of what it feels like to be a scientist. What I've always found fascinating, especially being somewhere like Nowlesund, where we are at the moment, this very remote research station. North Pole 750 miles that way, mainland Europe 750 miles that way. I mean, we're closer to Greenland than to Europe. What was your journey? And I mean life journey rather than to how many flights did you have to take? What was your life journey to get to this place?
Oh, wow.
How long have we got?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I like I said earlier, I always loved mountains, and my family moved around a lot, so I was exposed to a lot of environments, and I don't know why, stark environments, deserts and really big mountains. And I think I followed my passion off and on through life, having an interest in that, and realizing when I was in college that I wasn't studying the right thing, and changing course to try and figure out how I could be in places like this and make a living and have a career. And it turned out microbiology was a good way to do that, because people at that time hadn't studied these sorts of environments from a microbiological angle before.
You wanted an English lit major and then swapped straight over to microbiology?
No, but I was a philosophy major for a while, so
okay.
So that was quite a switch. But yeah.
And I mean, did you have to? I mean, there are obviously some skills and aptitudes you need beyond passion and curiosity.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what are some of those that to work hard at for those watching who want to sort of follow a similar career path?
Yeah, I think I use the word skills, and I really like that word because I think learning things that are actually skill based and that will give you skills. And in science, you need a good math background. You need to be able to do some coding, but not, you don't have to do that much in my field. But um, things that are a skill that you might have that other people don't. I mean, I've been invited on a lot of expeditions because I can do certain things, and you don't get invited if you just want to go hang out. So yeah, I think having a skill set and looking into what you need for that field that you're going into, and it's all, it's wonderful, and it's amazing to love nature and want to be in nature. And but if you really want to work there and do research, you really have to up your game in terms of skills and
So I've
science.
got math, I've got a bit of coding, I've got some sort of science,
Yeah,
obviously.
all kinds of science.
Would you add anything else to those?
Well, I think just the other thing is writing or having ability to communicate is really important. I mean, I think the biggest thing that stops people is not being able to write, and or communicate in some way. I mean, I'm not very verbal personally, but I at least can write, and I learned how to write somewhere along the way. So I mean, yeah, being able to communicate what you do to the rest of the world is important for any career, probably, but really important for science.
So it sounds like people have got a lot to work towards. They've got to be happy at -30. They've got to be able to trek across a glacier. They've got to be good at math, okay at coding, solid science, great communicator, good written English or whatever language they're going to communicate
Yeah,
in,
yeah,
and probably a few other things as and adaptable
adaptable. Yeah,
and
yeah.
all sorts of other things. Amazing. Well, there's a challenge. I mean, it sounds like an amazing, varied career, but a lot to get a handle of as well. Uh, First question we have is: what does it feel like to be so far away from home?
What does it feel like? It it feels good in some ways just to be out here, but it's also you feel like you're disconnected a bit. I mean, it's disorienting to be in someplace so beautiful, and realize just 2 days ago I was in Colorado. So yeah, it's weird.
Lovely question from Blake at the Grange Primary School, who would like to know what is your favourite animal in the Arctic?
My favorite animal. Um, wow, I think I'd have to say ice worms.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean,
Tell us about ice worms. I
yeah.
mean, are they like garden earthworms that we'd find at.
No, no, they're quite different, and actually they don't occur here. We've looked for them here, but
You
they're
haven't found them yet.
yeah, they haven't found ice worms here. But in glaciers in certain part of the world, there are these tiny worms that actually live in the ice, and they're quite amazing. They'll feed on the bacteria and other things that that we study, but I don't really study worms. But I think that's an animal at least.
You like finding them under the microscope when
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they're
they're pretty amazing.
pretty
Yeah.
excellent. We have Caleb. Your question about polar bears, I think we've covered. But good to go to Anthony. Do you have any extreme weather events in the Arctic, or you've been here in the summer, but perhaps tell us about the sort of range of maybe weather events you
Oh,
might have come
yeah.
across.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a lot of extreme weather events, and I can think of one. So I work mostly in mountains, and in the Andes, one year we were crossing part of the Andes mountain range, which are very big mountains, and we were there in the dry season, and there was a freak blizzard, and we were trapped in this little valley between two passes, and we literally could not get out of this valley for a week because the snow had piled up so much, and the animals, there were alpacas dying in the cold, and we were just, it was crazy. And all through this, the local people who lived there weren't worried, but we were scared to death. And they can walk around in the snow in sandals, even in the blizzard. And I have some pictures of them. Yeah,
Really?
yeah, they're amazing. And anyway, that was the most scary because we were actually stuck in a blizzard for quite a while.
I mean, it must be incredibly scary, especially when you're sort of blocked with that, 10 foot whatever of snow on the passes where you're sort of going, if you go up there, there's A, it's with fresh snow, tricky, B, clearing it is again tricky, and especially with pack animals as well.
Yeah, right. And we had horses that we couldn't get through the snow at all. Um,
Very technical question. I'm not quite sure who's asked this, but what are the characteristics of the bacteria? When you look at the bacteria, what are you studying? You talked about like DNA sequencing. Are you just looking at what's there, or are you looking at something more?
well, we're looking at what's there. That's the first question, and how varied there are and how they interact with each other. But we're also interested in which ones are active, especially when it's cold, because we're trying to find out new things like enzymes that might be useful in cold temperatures. Um, so we use something called transcriptomics to look at what organisms are actually making proteins when it's really cold. And I think I'm answering the question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's the thing about the characteristics of the bacteria.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think someone said you study bacteria. Some scientists will be sort of getting quite into the sort of and I think probably maybe on the news we've in terms of viral
Oh, yeah, yeah.
investigation we're looking at spike proteins and this and actually
Oh,
getting
okay,
into
yeah,
things
yeah.
that whether that's something you look at in terms of bacteria or whether it's just sort of okay what can we find here.
We're looking at characteristics that might explain how life can live under those conditions. So it's usually physiological
So
traits.
body traits.
Yeah, and enzymes they make, and like some of them make um, antifreeze proteins that work just like the antifreeze you put in your car. They make a weird chemicals to help them survive, and that's really cool.
I think we've got time for three more
Oh,
questions.
okay.
We've got a question around plants. And do many plants survive up here in the Arctic? Or what kind of plants do we have?
Well, here, we have tundra, which are a variety of different plants, grass-like plants and little forby things, little herbs. There are no trees up here, obviously, although there are tiny little willow trees that are about this big. That's as big as they get. So they're microscopic willow trees. So there are things that are related to trees, but they can't grow very big. Um, and that's only down, in the lower areas. Up high, it's all just microbial life.
And so when the snow melts, and I think the sun's snow melting, that's probably where the reindeer start to hang out a bit more to stand towards the shore. And this will all be sort of greeny brown.
Yeah, yeah. This will be quite green later in the summer.
This is from the Fireflies at Winsley, and asking when did you start studying the Arctic and why bring this bit into the rest of the places that you've been
Oh,
working
well,
on?
I started working in the mountains because I live in Colorado, which is a mountainous state in the U.S. And I then branched out to the Andes and Himalayas just out of my interest for mountains. And then that led to Antarctica. And then, because we found some things in the Himalayas that were very similar to things in Antarctica. So I had to go there. And then I had this opportunity and I couldn't turn it down to come to the Arctic and that to study the same things and just to see how different it is and how compare the different areas.
Very sadly, last question we have
Oh,
time for today, again from Fireflies, asking where do you work in the Arctic? Is it a single site here on Svalbard, or are you looking then to sort of spread across the region?
yeah, good question. I would love to spread across the region. It's just very hard to get access to very far north sites. We also have several sites in Alaska as well. But I'd love to work in way northern Canada as well, but I haven't been able to do that yet.
Not yet, not
Not
yet.
yet. Yeah,
Next year.
yeah. Hopefully. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Steve, an absolute pleasure to have you on
Oh, thank you.
AXA Arctic Live
Pleasure to
again.
be on.
Really, really enjoyable. Great to hear about all these aspects of life on our planet that we can ignore easily because we can't see it, but how important these microbes that you study are for the start of life on Earth and potentially for finding out where life might be on other planets. Amazing stuff. Thank you so much as well to all the classes who have joined. Tomorrow, very sadly, is the final day of AXA Arctic Live this year. We have 2 open Q&A sessions. So if there's anything that you have been burning to ask over the past week or so, line it up for the 2 sessions tomorrow, and we will whip through as many as we can. There's one for middle and high school students to start off with, and then elementary schools later on. Even if it's not in your time zone, get your questions in, and you can always watch on catch up to see whether your question was selected and answered. But for now, it just remains to say thank you to Steve and thank you to all the classes watching. And it's goodbye from Arctic Live. Bye bye.